Good afternoon again. Good afternoon. So this session is entitled In Service to the Children, right? In service to the children. And it's so important to me as a former educator myself. I started my professional DNA is in the classroom. And so having gone so far from the classroom, but still working to impact it, these moments where we can focus on and center the most important element, which is the child, is something that I'm really, really honored to be able to do. And I'm joined here today by Dr. Aaliyah Samuel, who is the president and CEO of CASEL, or I'm gonna just spell that out, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And they are really committed to advancing evidence-based practices for social emotional development. I'm going to share a little bit about Dr. Samuel's resume here. Dr. Samuel holds a doctorate in education, leadership, and policy from the University of South Florida, a master's in education from Walden University, bachelor's in elementary education from Tuskegee University. Today, look at that. Tuskegee in the house. Always in the house, Tuskegee. So today, it's a privilege that we get to hear from the expert insights of someone who stood in the shoes of a teacher, of a principal, national policy expert, and an advisor at the White House on education equity and innovation. Her voice has shaped how schools and communities nationwide understand and implement practices that help children and adults thrive. How is that for a resume?
You're sweet. And Gianna, you can tell me how I do on telling my story, okay? Okay.
So go ahead. How about you tell us a little bit more about what's CASEL working on and your journey as the leader at the helm?
Yeah. So I'm going to be honest with you, never in a million years did I think my professional career would take off the way it did. I cut my teeth 25 years ago as a special education teacher. So full stop. Never did I think that this journey that I have been on would be it. Started off as a special ed teacher and went on to become an assistant principal. And my first and only year as a principal, I thought education was crumbling then. And I'll paint the story for many of us educators. It'll date me, and then I'll also know who's in the room. But it was a 2009-10 school year. Common Core was rolling out. We were in the midst of a recession, and it was like the ish hit the fan in education. I was a principal at John White Elementary in Tucson, Arizona. Shout out to the Arizona folks. And I remember walking into my school building and having no assistant principal, a part-time school psychologist, part-time guidance counselor, and we were just starting the Title I paperwork to take our school into Title I status. So it was a wild year. And at the same time, the governor was doing budget cuts because of the recession. And I thought to myself, who in the world is informing these policies? Because clearly they don't know what it's like to be in a school building every day. And the disconnect between the policies that were happening and the realities as an administrator on the ground, I said to myself, I cannot do this. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing. I also found out I was expecting my oldest son, and so like there was a perfect storm of life changes happening. So I left my principalship and I said, you know, while on maternity leave, it was Super Bowl weekend, I have a brand new baby, and a parent friend was saying, you know, there's this new state organization called First Things First. It's going to be opening up. You should become, my dissertation work was in family support and early literacy and language development. You should apply. And it was working directly with the Arizona Department of Education, the governor's office, and this new state agency that would be dedicated to birth to age 8. So I took the leap of faith, left all that I knew, which was public education, and said policy is going to be where I dedicate my life. that was the catalyst that absolutely changed my professional trajectory, which to me is that's when that perfect alignment of the universe of purpose and passion align and professionally. And from there, I had a series of job changes. Left Arizona to run the education division at the National Governors Association, where I had the very fortunate pleasure to work with all of the nation's governors on a whole host of education policy, from early childhood to K-12 to into post-secondary in the workforce. And remind you, I am a public school special ed teacher who's now doing this. So it has been
and a new mom.
And a new mom.
And a new mom.
And a
I
new
forgot
mom.
that part on your resume, because
Yes.
being a mother is really important. That's probably
Yes.
more important than the doctorate.
Absolutely, which is why you see my sons on here, because through every journey that I've taken, I've brought my boys along. Because one, I want them to understand the importance of finding your purpose. Two, living your life with passion, and then finding something to do that you love. And so it's important for them to know that this is a part of who mom is, just like they are a part of me. This is a part of me as well. And ended up right before the pandemic started, I was doing a lot of work nationally, and I had released a podcast called Testing America's Freedom, and it was a podcast around how assessments really created a lot of the inequities that we see now, and it was a whole journey. Well, pandemic hits, and I'm at home with a kindergartner and a fourth grader on virtual school, and I get a call from the administration to join the administration. And initially I thought, why are they calling me for campaign money? Like, the election's over, why am I getting this call? And it was like, no, we're the White House personnel, and we would like you to join, particularly because you have a national outreach, and we need help reopening the nation's schools. Within the first 100 days of the administration, we want to move from 98% virtual to 100% open by that following school year.
Wow.
So I joined the administration with, again, a kindergartner and a fourth grader at home. I was also still doing my part-time fellowship at Harvard. I'm a senior fellow at the Center on the Developing Child. And there was a lot of self-talk of, Aaliyah, is this for you? And very much so, like 2021, we are in this moment now that history is being made. And to be a part of the nation's efforts to reopen schools while I was living at home, I knew it was a historic moment. And what you'll see here is actually on my last day, I did work for Secretary Cardona. On my last day, he called me into his office and he said, you know, Aaliyah, I understand why you're leaving, but I'm sad that you're leaving, but go do great work. And how I got connected to CASEL, which is the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning, is that year that we were trying to reopen the nation's schools. And this is, again, pre-vaccine, we're still virtual, and I'm traveling, masked and all the precautions to try to understand what did schools need in order for us to create guidance for schools to be open. And city over city, state over state, red, blue, urban, rural, poor, rich, what we heard was relationships. And there was a teacher out of Charlotte Mecklenburg who said to me, you know, Dr. Samuel, we can't return to learning until we return to our relationships. And that's when I had the aha, really, that the next phase of my career, I wanted to commit myself to this work being our academic progress of our kids and their social emotional well-being. I'm an 70s, 80s baby, and you know, during that time, the thing
I do like that. I'm never on the stage with a 80s baby. Everybody's like, I'm a 60s baby.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay.
Yeah. And you know, in that time period, Jane Fonda, Richard Simmons, it was all about let's get physical. That was the thing of that time. Well-being, mental health, these social relationships, that is the thing of our time. And so that's really what brings me to this work. And honestly, I have an uncanny ability to pick difficult jobs, like, you know, reopening the nation's schools during a pandemic. Let's go do that. And then now many of you live in states where SEL is politicized. And how to thread the needle to ensure that we're not partisan, but we're staying true, Bree, to the fundamental needs that we know not only our students need, but our educators at a time when the politics seem to be taking over. It's a very real issue.
So you talked about the politics. I got to do the sobering thing. So I'm going to read some points here because I think it helps to contextualize where this social, emotional area in education is right now, right? The FY 26 budget reduces the ED, or the Federal Department of Education, that is not currently closed, decimated but not closed, by 15%. But that does decimate Head Start, Title I, some IDEA, and SEED grants. Sweeping executive orders prohibiting the practice of ensuring that every child is dignified in schools, right? Cutting programs focused on social emotional learning and mental health. As of June 30th, we know freezing of approximately $5 to $7 billion in federal education funds, and the cancellation of $1 billion in grants under the Safer Communities Act, which was a bipartisan act passed under the Biden administration, with funds intended to train and hire school psychologists, social workers, counselors. So this is the climate, right? Like, this is why this conversation is critical, because you all are about 6 weeks away, if so much, maybe 3 or 4, from going back to schools under this particular climate. So the leaders in this room, Dr. Samuel, are faced with an incredible, inordinate task. How do you advise them to make the case that with slim resources, they should be investing time and energy into leader and educator wellness?
So Jonathan over here has helped me move my slides like 4 times because I was trying to connect the conversations from today. But I'm going to skip around a minute because I do think it's important. You mentioned all of the challenges of today. We're hemorrhaging our teachers. And what I hear, and again, we are in 44 states. We have also, year over year, we've grown international. We actually, because of the international interest, have launched an international strategy because this work around social emotional learning is global. One of the things we hear, whether it's district, state, or even other countries, is our educators or even our leaders are saying we have so much on our plate, we cannot focus on the well-being. We just can't. We've got to catch up on academics. We're getting pressure from parents. The behaviors are out of the roof. We just can't. And what we say is we hear that there's a lot on the plate. But the reality is social emotional learning is the plate in which all other things are served on. And so all the while it might feel like it's a lot, if we don't start with that foundation, then we already are going to miss the mark. Another thing I hear all the time is, well, SEL and academics, they're on opposite ends of the spectrum. You know, our NAEP scores are in the toilet, our math proficiency is low, our reading, we cannot focus on SEL because we have to focus on the academics. So academics is put over here. Then we hear, oh, well, our behaviors are out of the way, our kids can't build relationships, technology is calling their attention. They're on 2 opposite ends of the spectrum. And again, our response is, it's really not. What we're talking about is the same side or different sides of the same coin. And so when we talk about well-being, and I'm telling you, I'm learning this both as a parent, also I've seen it as a practitioner, but also on the policy side, that we have to get to a point when we're talking about this holistically, because the reality of it is you cannot bifurcate education and academics and well-being. We also heard from Jess, our CEO, that good leaders practice these skills as well. And so again, we can't bifurcate good leadership from the skills and competencies that we're talking about. And so ultimately, it's focusing on the integration and how these show up integrated rather than trying to make it an either or pit one thing against the other.
I like the phrase, and I'm going to say it again, and you correct me if I'm wrong, so folks can write it down. But that it's not something. SEL is not to be added to the plate.
Correct.
It is the plate. It's the plate, and I think that makes a lot of sense, because imagine having a great curriculum, a great teacher, a great you have the resources, but the environment for a child, they don't feel included.
Right.
Or let's say the environment is in your school is warm and fuzzy, but that child is coming from an environment where they're facing certain elements that they bring into the learning space. Right. So we do have to remember that you're not adding anything to the plate. Like, this is step one in the job. And you and I were talking earlier about just how that lands on women differently than it does on men. And there is research, definitely lots of research to support that women, we lead, we just kind of innately lead with our heart, right? And I made the joke, I know this is recorded, but I'd made a joke and say, well, that's why most serial killers are men and they're not really women, right? Because something with the frontal lobe. But here's where I'm going with this, right? This is about women and wellness. We know what the plate is. I want to quote some data from an organization called Women Leading Ed. This year, they released their second annual survey results it's called the Insight Survey. And this data is of state and district leaders in education, representing over 37 states and over 100 systems serving over 10 million students. So it's important you know the sample size. But it's sobering. And if you were here last year, I did present on generational leadership, and some of this data really resonated with me. 77% of women leaders, so that's district and state leaders in education, including 82% of female superintendents. Raise your hand if you're a superintendent. Okay. Reported making career sacrifices their male colleagues didn't have to make. And then over 50% of women had been passed over for advancement in favor of men despite those sacrifices. So let's let that sit for 1 minute, right? What I hear is that this is the invisible labor, the invisible emotional labor that the women in this room carry, and the sacrifices that we have to make to ensure that our careers are secure, and how that fizzles out into the way we show up in our districts and the classrooms. So here's the question. How do we use our power to break that cycle, and what does it look like to share the work on that plate equitably, equitable distribution of sustaining a positive, healthy school climate without taxing the women at the helm?
So first, as a woman, I just want to say the struggle is real. Like, the struggle is real. And as a mom, I firsthand, I see it. And one of the things that we talk about, and I know your question is to women, and I'll hone in on that, but it goes into that plain safety procedures, precautions that we hear every flight. You must put your mask on first before helping anyone else. Like, it sounds so basic, it sounds so simple, and it is about setting those firm boundaries and knowing that you have to put your mask on first, because ultimately, if you don't, you cannot pour from an empty cup. All things we hear and we know to be true, but spending the time practicing it and those reminders, it's real. Jess, I appreciated your transparency about even therapy, and an illuminating moment for me with my therapist is she said to me, Aaliyah, you don't have to keep setting yourself on fire to keep everyone warm. And I was like, I felt that. I genuinely, and to really start protecting those boundaries and setting firm boundaries to know that it's great that I'm keeping others warm around me, but at what cost to myself? And once you start shifting that mental model, releasing yourself from that guilt of having to do and be all things, it's easier to say, you know what, I've got to put my mask on first. You know what, I can't help you if I truly have nothing else to give. And I think more and more women were starting to talk about that and create these safe spaces for us to be transparent. And I think the more that we tell these honest stories about just how difficult it is to be a woman leader, it's real. And I also, with my sons, they know the term invisible labor, because I keep telling them, it's not magic. It's not magic that food appears in the refrigerator. Like, it's not magic. That is called labor. Somebody went to, and so that they can see and know and hear these terms so that when they become partners, they understand that it's not just a woman's responsibility. So I think we're starting to see that generational shift, but it really starts with us doing the very basic things of being willing to. And again, I do not want to sound like I have it all together, because it is a daily struggle for myself to be able to say, I've got to do this for my own well-being.
Yeah, yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is breaking that cycle is verbalizing that it exists.
Yes.
And so grateful to Marilyn and the founders of the Power Trip, because it creates a space to come and be vulnerable and talk about the great stuff, but talk about the hard stuff as well. And I love therapy. I love retail therapy. I love I love all the therapies, right?
Well, Bree, can I just touch on that?
Yeah, tell me. Okay.
So I was one
Are
of
you
the
going to
ones
tell me to
with-
stop that retail?
No,
Because I
no,
can't.
no,
We'd
listen,
have to
life is
wrap
short.
this.
Life is short. Live your best life.
Okay.
I was one of the ones that got caught up in travel delays. So I flew out of DCA, got to Dallas, and then after Dallas, my flight was canceled. And it was either get here today at 2 o'clock or drive 3.5 hours.
And
I was like, Hertz, where are you? I am driving because just as much as I consider it a blessing to share the work that we are doing and what we're doing nationally. Being in this space is also food for the soul for me, to be around women who are also leading through really historic times, and to hear, yep, I left my kids at home, or yep, I just got a call about, like, we're all managing it. It really is not only me being able to pour, but you all pouring into me as well. Like Alicia, I met her just at the check-in, and just the warm smile of being a returning power tripper to say, welcome to this space. What that fundamental just hello and greeting did, to then sitting with, I'm sorry, what was your name? Anna Marie, and we were watching a butterfly. Like, these little connections and what it does then as we go back to do the hard work and prepare for a new school year.
So let's get a little more granular, because you've got some good stuff here.
Yes.
So we know that breaking the cycle means we got to talk about it, but we don't want to talk in circles, right? We do want to talk in a productive way. CASEL is an organization that is known very well for its PBIS work, and it is often associated with providing resources, with providing support that guide our hand with children. But it is not just an organization that focuses on the wellness of children. CASEL also focuses on adult social emotional learning. Yes, we need that too, and we need to revisit it time and again, right? That look in the mirror, check yourself before you
Wreck yourself.
Right. Talk about CASEL's framework for cultivating adult SEL, and how can these leaders in the room use those resources in those conversations about their own SEL?
Yep. So first, I think it's important to note that CASEL has been around for 30 years. And what makes CASEL so unique is, one, we are the organization that coined the phrase social emotional learning 30 years ago. And we are most known for really 3 aspects when it comes to academics and social emotional learning. The research, because this is not just what we know to be true or our opinion. There is depth of research over decades and over millions of students who prove the outcomes to this. So the research and the evidence around this is really important. And actually, in this time of politicalness, the number one thing that when we get outreach from districts that they're looking for is, what's the evidence that I can use with my school board, the state board, my governor's office, et cetera, and how do you communicate this in this environment? Help us with those 2 things. So it's the research, it's the policy, and it's the actual practice and implementation. And I do want to share some examples of the adult SEL work that's happening across the nation, because this work is happening. So CASEL's been around 30 years, and we have a very deep footprint. And there's 2 really primary resources. I'm going to give you a QR code because we have a lot of free stuff online. Our school guide is one of our most downloaded resources, and there's a whole section in our school guide around adult SEL. Also, Our program guide is another really highly downloaded resource, and that program guide is a list of 99 evidence-based SEL programs that you can explore in your district. But when we talk about cultivating SEL, there's some actual practices that you can incorporate both at the district level, but also for principals, school-based leaders at your school site as well. Our 3 signature practices, which is a way to really promote an inclusive belonging and setting, is also another one of our free, most downloaded resources that help create a space where adults can feel seen, welcomed, and valued. And there's a few I want to just share, and I wanted to make sure I pulled it. So I know we have some folks from Illinois and Georgia and California just through interactions yesterday, so I want to give some examples. So in Illinois, through our school guide, which was not in the original theory of action, but the more that we started to do research on student SEL, that's when the focus on adults also became illuminated. But they have really focused on how to infuse SEL so that teachers can better model SEL with their students. And it includes looking at things like working with human resources with hiring policies, school security officers, union leadership, teacher preparation programs, to really include that culture of social emotional well-being, because we know that when the adults model the behaviors, when the adults have the language to name these skills, they're better able to then model those behaviors, because kids don't do what we tell them to do, they do what they see. And so it's important. I also want to talk about California, who there we have actually Oakland and Anchorage, Alaska, have really been utilizing our 3 signature practices to really help integrate SEL into not only staff meetings, but also into the classroom every day. And really what it has done is create a model from the adults to the students. And when we say adults, it's not just the teachers, it's the crossing guard, it's the cafeteria workers, it's the custodians, who are all being taught the language, modeling the competencies, to be able to then not only model the behaviors, but to encourage it. I also want to talk about the 4 settings, because oftentimes there's an expectation that, oh, well, it only happens in the classroom, or SEL is only in the classroom, when really there's 4 primary settings that when we talk about a systemic approach to social emotional learning, it includes involving the community. So think of all the out of school time, think about sports. Those are all opportunities to really engage the adults who are working with young people, our families, our caregivers. Also in this political time, some of the pushback that we've received in some of our communities is the role of SEL as parents. It shouldn't be taught in schools. How many of you have heard that? And our response to that is, you're absolutely right. Parents and caregivers are kids' first teachers, but you can't go into a classroom or a school building and think that this doesn't show up. For example, self-management. And this is the example I love to use with parents who particularly tell me that SEL shouldn't be taught in school. I say to them, okay, you have a child, and your child comes home and says, Mom, so-and-so kid hit me. What are you going to say as a parent? Well, that kid needs to keep their hands to themselves. What did the teacher do? That's self-management. That is a teacher being able to create a classroom environment where kids know, here's how we manage our emotions. If you're frustrated with so-and-so, you don't hit them. You use your words. You do, like, that's what we're talking about. And so to be able to really give very practical examples of what these competencies look like. Also schools and classrooms, because we know. So this is CASEL's framework that we use at all levels to talk about the importance of social emotional learning.
Wow. I'm still a teacher at heart, so we're going into our last question, but I have to summarize. I have to summarize. So we heard you say that to make the case for investing in the wellness of leaders in this room, the case is not to be made, the plate is the case, and we can't begin to talk about academics or achievement unless we have tackled what it means to curate a healthy, positive learning environment. And I also heard you talk about all of those in the school building who are involved in that, all the way down to custodial staff and the lunchroom leaders. It is a community that stands behind social emotional learning. And then we breaking the cycle that women leaders are often trapped in, where we overextend ourselves. That is finding, this is how I would summarize this: find your tribe. Know your tribe, know who to go to, talk about it. That distributive leadership comes behind the conversation. So this is, and then you also shared some amazing resources. Please capture the QR codes, and make sure you download as well the tools that Dr. Samuel shared.
And I will make sure that we get these out to you as well. We do host an annual conference. Our conference is in November. This year, our focus is really around 4 strands of social emotional learning. One is around AI and tech, because as AI and technology continue to dominate, what we keep hearing is, okay, technology can replace certain automated type of skills, but it's the deep thinking, it's the curiosity, it's the perspective taking. Those are the human-centered skills that our kids are going to need. So we're digging deep into a track on AI. Workforce is another one. We've had the business community come to us and say, look, you do this in K-12, whether it's soft skills, durable skills, the things that we most commonly fire for are these SEL skills. It's not making responsible decisions. It's not being able to work collaboratively in teams. Can you guys help us make sure that these kids are ready for the workforce? Yeah. And so we're digging deeper in partnerships with the workforce. Google is one, Microsoft is like some of these key partners. Well-being will continue to be a deep part of our conversation for the fall, and then academic integration, because we're getting a lot of questions of how can I integrate this better in the day-to-day, so that teachers feel like they have the time and the bandwidth for both.
Well, I'm gonna have to have you back here next year to see if you can talk about that one. How do you integrate it? But here are some words. So Power Trip is defined in many ways. This is my, I think, 3rd or 4th year with Power Trip. And I would say that these are also words I would use to describe this. I want to close us with a question, a call to action question. Transformative, life-changing, groundbreaking, renewal, encouraged, and powerful. Those are some of the words that Power Trip attendees have used in the past to describe their experience here. So given the political climate that we face today around education, what courageous steps can these leaders take in the first 6 weeks going back to school to ensure that they're creating the conditions for a positive, healthy school climate that can be sustained long term?
Right now, one word comes to mind, and that's belonging. So many of our families, communities, students are seeing headline after headline that's actually telling them they don't belong, whether it is our LGBTQ plus community, whether it is our kiddos who come from other countries. There's just so much that's telling them you don't belong here. And creating that sense of belonging in your schools and for your schools. And it's not just the students, but also teachers who are carrying so much, our staff. So standing firm on what it means for your community to create a sense of belonging and to lead authentically with that will be, I really believe, the greatest challenge, but the greatest opportunity for us. And I can tell you, as somebody who's been called more names now in this role than I have ever in my life, the one thing that really at its core keeps me grounded is there are 50 million kids in the public school system across the nation. 50 million that are counting on us for an education, for a future, for relationships, to be seen. And we can either focus on the politics, which is a very small few, or what we fundamentally know to be true, because all of us as educators, we don't get in this to get rich or, for prominence. We do this because we believe in the people. So just to keep telling the stories, create spaces for people to come authentically as who they are by showing up authentically. I think that if we can do that, and Kemi said it earlier, it is time to lead courageously, and history is being made right now, and we have to decide what side of history we'll be on. And I choose the side of our young people day after day.
Amen. Well, I will give you some new. You are wonderful. You are a change maker, and you are a legacy already. While you're sitting here, what are your sons' names?
My oldest is Chaz Anthony, and the little one is Cruz.
Chaz, Anthony, and Cruz are blessed to have a mother like you, and I know your husband as well is blessed to have a wife like you.
I'll remind him later.
He better. He better. It looks like we might have 2 more minutes, so we didn't think about this one, but. Marilyn, I got 2 minutes. I got 2 more minutes. Apple Watch says 2 minutes. So is there anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask Aaliyah directly? Please just stand. We have 2 minutes.
So I do have a question, and I do work with a lot of publishers and ed tech companies, and it is such a political thing. Mm-hmm. And people are, especially parents, are looking at websites, looking at all the literature. So what kind of words would you be putting in there instead of social emotional? And I'm a big fan of CASEL, so you did a great job.
Thank you. So honestly, we've done a series of message testing over the last 2 years. And really what we have found is by using the acronym SEL, that's kind of the dead on arrival when we start with the acronym, that just is off-putting out the gate. And by doing 2 things, one, actually saying the word social emotional learning and not using SEL goes a little further, but then also really sticking to the competencies and not saying SEL. So talking about self-management, talking about responsible decision-making, talking about what does social awareness means, like actually, and I know it's long, and boy, does it make for a longer conversation, but I'm sorry, the speaker from earlier, what was your name? I'm sorry. I'm drawing like a complete blank.
Lisa.
Yes, Lisa. Lisa was saying take the time to walk them through it and at least be honest about what these things mean has gone a long way. And so really just unpacking those competencies and then all the skills, like on our website too, like when you click on self-awareness, there's all these different skills that come underneath that. Like who doesn't want their kid to be compassionate and more empathetic? Right. Who doesn't want their kid to be able to have civil discourse with people that they may not disagree with? So using more of that terminology has actually gone much, much further. And also it's why we're engaging the business community, because when you have KPMG, the 3rd largest accounting firm in the world, saying we have an entire vertical now dedicated to this for our employees, it goes a long way. So really engaging the business community has been a key lever.
Anyone else? Anyone else in the back, in the middle, on the sides? The cameramen? Questions from you all? Skylar, what's up? Everybody? Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Samuel, for joining us, for being at Power Trip, for going the extra mile. And it's been an honor to learn from you, and I know this audience appreciates you. One more time for Dr. Samuel.
Well,
thank you so much.
Sincerely, thank you for what you do each and every day, because sincerely, you set the tone, you provide the container to make the changes. And so thank you for your leadership and what you do every day, seen and unseen. All right.